everyone. Welcome to Business Law 210. We are discussing now about the topic, Lecture 10, about the capacity. The contractual capacity is the ability to know and understand the terms of contract. And for a contract to be valid, all parties involved must have capacity. A contract might not be valid if one or both parties that involved lack the legal capacity to contract. So this lecture will discuss about the capacity, legal capacity to make a contract. Care should be taken in dealing with certain persons because of the invalidating effects of the lack of capacity to contract. We are going to talk about the importance of capacity. There are several types of people subject to degrees of incapacity to enter enforceable contracts. Your PPT, the PPT that I share with you, cover the overall information regarding this issue. Minor is also subject to our discussion today. A person who is mentally ill, intoxicated, married woman, and corporation, and a person who is classified bankrupt by a financial institution. So those are the types of people subject to degrees of incapacity to enter enforceable contracts. Corporation and most adults have capacity. However, minors, mentally incompetent persons, and those who are intoxicated do not have capacity to make a contract. Let's really discuss one by one of this matter. A minor. Why should minors be protected? On page 5, you can see and you can read the following subject. Minor has an immature mind and can't think about what is good or bad for him. So their possibility minors are often exploited. Legislation will help to provide for a full contractual capacity at the age of 18 years, depend on the country and the legal system in how it's practicing for certain age number of population. In this case, we are talking about people who are below 18 years is considered a minor. The legislation then gives to 18 years old the right to vote, buy alcoholic products, become a company director, for example. The person can marry or can divorce and make a decision about their marriage status or family status and make a will. Other legislation also prohibit minors from buying alcoholic product such as liquor. You might not be able to buy cigarette. They might not be able to buy a cigarette. They might not be able to do or to write to vote. Yeah, those are what happened. Could happen to minor. And then what happened to a contract with or by a minor? So most states consider persons under the age of 18 in this regard to be minors. Minors lack capacity to enter into a contract. If they do enter into a contract, the contract is generally considered voidable. They have the right to cancel the contract at any time before reaching the age of 18. If, however, a minor cancels the contract, the benefit that he or she received must be returned. And the law of minors has two aims. First one is to protect those under 18, which are minors, from entering disadvantageous contract because of their lack of understanding and or lack of experiences. Second thing, to ensure that the law does not unnecessarily prejudice or unfairness or injustice adults who deal with minors, because if it did, then adult would not deal with minor, and minor would be unable to obtain goods on and service from the minors or produced by the minors. So minor contract can be classified as void, valid, or voidable. Valid minor's contract at common law is the only contract binding on minors are of two classes. First one, contract for necessaries. It is a contract for goods and services reasonably necessary for their living, such as food, clothing, accommodation, medical services, healthcare insurance, basic insurance that is mandatory by the government, and educational program, basic educational program. Yeah, depend on the country specific age. In Indonesia, up to 18. There's a basic education that you are a parent or adult within the family, especially the biological parent or guardian parent, should provide the education necessary for them. Yeah, valid minor contract. It is the contract for those goods and services to particular minors stationed in life and to the minor's actual requirements. Necessary have been held not to include luxuries such as weapons, a racehorse, a trading contract, and a contract for the building of a house. Um, and the second one, the valid minor's contract, which is actually second thing, employment, apprenticeship, and training contract. These contracts are the second exception to the rule of non-enforceability of minor's contract. A minor is bound by a contract of employment, apprenticeships, training, or education. If for the minor's benefit and whether or not for necessaries. The case of McLaughlin versus Darcy. The defendant here, is a minor, Les Darcy. He was a professional boxer. You can find this case on page 13. Yeah, who has a career being developed, wanted to go to the USA to gain further instruction, which was unavailable in Australia. So Darcy made a contract to secure a passport with P or Mr. P. Thus, Mr. P, with Darcy's consent, went to Melbourne to arrange for a passport. In the meantime, Darcy absconded, ran away, escaped to the US, to United States. In these circumstances, still hotly debated without a passport, it was understood by Darcy that he would have to pay for Mr. P's application. Whether successful or not, Darcy pleaded or begged infancy, childhood, early years to an action by Mr. P for his remuneration. And what happened then? The verdicts or decision or judgment for Mr. P was affirmed, which is confirmed or announced on appeal. The jury was then justified in finding that services rendered by Mr. P were necessary. What will be the decision? A contract to secure a passport was regarded as beneficial and binding on the minor, as the minor wished to go to the US, the United States, to pursue a professional boxing career. Remember, the second contract or employment contract bind the minor. In determining whether a contract is beneficial, so then you can read on PPT page 15, the whole of the contract must be considered. the whole of the contract must be beneficial before it can be regarded as binding on the minor. And what happened is for the voidable minor's contract. The definition of voidable contract is actually a contract that can be set aside by one of the parties to the contract, usually the injured party. A voidable contract, unlike a void contract, is a valid contract. At most, one party to the contract is bound. The unbound party may repudiate the contract, at which time the contract is void. For example, depending upon jurisdiction, a minor has the right to repudiate certain contract. Any contract with a minor is thus a voidable contract. If a minor were to enter into a contract with an adult, then the adult will be bound by the contract, whereas the minor could choose to avoid performing the contract. And what happens if a contract can be rejected by one of the parties? On legal grounds, it is called a voidable contract. A voidable contract is valid and binding unless the entitled party or the party who has legal grounds to reject the contract voids it. So contract binding unless repudiated by the minor. Thus, it is about contract where one party is a minor and binding on both parties unless and until the minor repudiates them while under 18. They are voidable at the instance of the minor. And remember, if the minor has no benefit from the contract, he is entitled for full refund. If the minor has some benefits from the contract, he or she is not entitled for any refund. Let's see on different example on page 19. In this case, there's a issue between Miss Steinberg versus Scala or Leeds, where Miss Tulip Steinberg, she is a minor. She was a minor applied for and was allowed 500 shares in the defendant company. She paid both the amount due on the allotment and the first call on the shares. 18 months later, while still a minor, she purported to repudiate the contract and attempted to recover the money she had paid. Because she had received the 500 shares she had applied for, she was not able to recover her money as there had not been a total failure of consideration. If the minor has received no benefit under the contract, then the full amount paid should be recoverable by her or by the minor. And void minor's contract is a contract which has no legal effect. On page 20, you will see that a contract is void when the law declares it to be so absolutely there's no contract whatever of the parties. Void minor's contracts happen when it do not bind the minor but do bind to other party. Contract not binding unless ratified or approved or confirmed. The contract are only binding if ratified by the minor at or within a reasonable time after the age of majority or adult years. And second issue regarding the incapacity of the contract is mentality incapacitate. As genuine concern and meeting of minds, is the basis of a contract. So a person suffering from a mental disorder will not be able to enter a valid contract. However, as this general rule will allow people to avoid their contractual obligation by feigning or pretending or faking mental incapacity, then the mentally ill are bound by their contract unless they can show they did not understand what they were doing at the time of making the contract. The other person was aware of their impaired mental condition and making use of the situation. They can be real, sincere, honest. So there's also an agreement and approval process in this case. The burden of proving these two matters lies on the mentally disordered person. If they can be proved, usually by medical expert, psychiatry, psychology, or uh, an expert who has knowledge on neuroscience or mental disorder, the contract is voidable at the option of the mentally disordered person. If they cannot be proved, such as where person suffering mental illness enters a contract during a lucid, clear, sane, sober period with person B or the second person who is unaware of any mental disability on the part of A. So the contract will not be able to set aside by persons, the first person or A's representative. The third issue regarding the incapacity is the intoxicated. Incapacity through alcohol or other drug is judged by the same test of incapacity as for the mentally ill. It has to be from a tool, equipment, from a medical expert who has the license to testify or to review the condition or body condition of that person. If the matters can be proved, then the contract is voidable at the instance of the intoxicated person, their preference. On regaining soberness, such as clear, logical, or sane, the intoxicated person might either withdraw from the contract or ratify it. The fourth issue regarding the incapacity is married woman. Until the late 19th century, married women lacked full legal capacity. However, statutory change to this incapacity began in the UK back in 1857, and the legislation in force in all states now gives a married woman full contractual capacity. The fifth issue regarding the incapacity is the corporation or our corporation. A company is a legal person or institution in the same way as a natural person is a person. By law, the corporation law explains the form of the company contracts are to take the same form as required in contracts of individual. The sixth issue in regards to the incapacity you can see on page 26 is bankrupt. Just because someone is bankrupt, it does not deprive, take away, or remove her or his general capacity to contract. However, there are certain provisions of the Bankruptcy Act which relate to dealing by bankrupts. If an undischarged bankrupt or the person has a lot of a debt and have not paid the debt in full yet, obtains credit or enters into a contract for goods and services that is involving an obligation to pay, for example, $3,000 or more without disclosing he or she is an undischarged bankrupt. He or she is liable under the Bankruptcy Act, um, the imprisonment for up to 3 years. Next one is the case question. One, you will see there are two cases that you can read through, that you can resolve, and what you can have to give, you need to give the opinion regarding this case, and please follow the law format answer as well. The case question two, um, both case actually in regards to the minor situation, and the case two as well. Yeah, so what you can do is discuss whether the case were necessary for that person under discussion on each case, and as well as a minor. Thank you very much for your attention. Looking forward to receive your feedback, and thank you having me in this subject. See you next time. Have a good day.